Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, may be cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. The sprawling estate in the Hollywood Hills was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant Art Deco lines gleamed under the California sun, with every guest playing their glittering role in the world of cinema. Then Victor Langford, the powerful film producer, was found dead in his private study. A glass of poisoned champagne shattered at his feet. The police saw a simple case of suicide amid financial woes. Yes, but Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theater of glamour and ambition was playing the role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The grand estate of Victor Langford crowned the Hollywood Hills in pure Art Deco glory. Its white stucco walls and sharp geometric lines catching the late afternoon California sun like polished chrome. Inside the vast drawing room, crystal chandeliers tinkled gently overhead, while the air carried layers of luxury. Rich Cuban cigar smoke curling lazily, expensive Chanel perfume drifting from silk-clad guests, and the faint, sweet breath of hothouse roses arranged in tall vases. Polished mahogany tables reflected the warm glow of lamps. Velvet curtains framed sweeping views of the gardens, and the parquet floor gleamed under every careful step. No, Hercule Poirot, small and impeccable in his tailored suit, had been invited as a guest of honor. He stood apart from the towering Hollywood figures, touching his magnificent mustache thoughtfully as his sharp green eyes scanned the room. "Mon ami," he murmured to Captain Hastings beside him. "This is no ordinary gathering. It is a theater. Every smile is rehearsed. Every gesture belongs to a role." Hastings, sipping icy champagne, felt the cold crystal bite his palm and nodded. The laughter around them sounded too perfectly timed, like lines delivered for an invisible audience. A piercing scream shattered the polished atmosphere. Eleanor Langford, the producer's glamorous wife and once famous actress, burst through the double doors, her silk evening gown rustling wildly. "Victor! Oh, mon Dieu! C'est Victor!" She collapsed onto a velvet chaise longue with theatrical grace, one hand pressed to her forehead. Guests froze. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed deeply, marking the exact moment the evening tilted into tragedy. Poirot moved at once, his egg-shaped head tilted in quiet curiosity. He entered the private study first. Victor Langford lay slumped across his desk, face down among scattered papers. A crystal champagne flute lay shattered on the floor. The sharp smell of spilled champagne mixed with the unmistakable bitter almond odor of cyanide. The room itself was opulent theater, crackling fire warming the space, leather-bound books lining the walls, fresh lilies scenting the air. "The stage is set for murder," Poirot said softly. "Observe, Hastings, the body arranged just so, as though waiting for applause." Inspector Harlan arrived minutes later with his team, heavy boots thudding across the cold marble terrace and letting in a sudden chill night air that clashed with the drawing room's fire-warmed comfort. The burly policeman surveyed the scene and grunted. Suicide, plain and simple. Langford's studio was bleeding money, debts everywhere. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, eyes gleaming. "Suicide? Mais non. This despair has been staged. The performance is meant to convince us." Eleanor dabbed at dry eyes with a crisp linen napkin. Her grief played to perfection. He was so troubled these last months, she whispered, voice trembling on cue. Poirot studied her closely. Madame, your role as the grieving widow is most convincing. But when did you last see your husband alive? For a heartbeat, her mask slipped. Did you catch it, mon ami? Before she recovered with a delicate sniff. Marcus Hale, Victor's business partner and a well-known director, stood puffing a cigar, smoke drifting like stage fog. We argued earlier. Standard Hollywood nonsense. Nothing serious. His hands remained rock steady. Poirot noted it. Monsieur Hale, you play the loyal partner admirably. Yet loyalty rarely involves shouting matches over money on the night of death. Vivian Drake, the young starlet with wide, innocent eyes, clutched her champagne glass tightly, soft kid gloves trembling just a fraction. I was out in the garden, smelling the lilies. It's all so awful. Her whisper was fragile, perfect. Poirot tilted his head. Mademoiselle, innocence is your finest role. But the garden at night is cold and dark. Why walk there alone? James Croft, the butler, remained rigid in his rough tweed uniform that seemed out of place among the silk and velvet. I poured the champagne myself, sir, from the same bottle everyone drank. Furniture wax clung faintly to him. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. You performed the perfect servant, but servants see what happens behind the curtains, no? Sylvia Thorne, a rival producer with cool composure, sipped strong hot coffee, the continental aroma cutting through the tension. Victor owed me a great deal, yes, but murder. Ridiculous. Poirot addressed you directly. Observe this performance, mon ami, calm in the face of violent death. Too composed, perhaps. The psychology whispers otherwise. Rain began to patter against the tall windows, it a soft, rhythmic underscore to the growing drama. Poirot arranged objects on a side table into perfect symmetry, his mind already turning. The cast stands ready, grieving widow, loyal partner, innocent starlet, dutiful servant, bitter rival. Each plays a part in this theater of crime. Hastings shivered in the draught. Who do you suspect first, Poirot? The little detective smiled faintly. Everyone, mon ami, until the masks begin to crack. As police sealed the study, the fire crackled on, wood smoke blending with lingering perfume. Poirot inhaled deeply, little grey cells stirring. The poison was in the champagne, tasteless at first, then that fatal bitter aftertaste of betrayal. He turned to you. Watch carefully now. Someone in this glittering company is playing the murderer far too perfectly. Eleanor gave another soft sob, the handkerchief still dry. He was everything to me. Poirot noted the absence of tears. Madame, your performance touches the heart, yet true grief should moisten the eyes, no? She faltered again. Ask yourself, why does she refuse to look toward the study door? The night deepened. Doors closed softly through the house. Poirot drew himself up, still small, yet somehow filling the room. Remember, mes amis, in the theater of crime, every actor eventually forgets their lines. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning sun poured through the tall Art Deco windows of the drawing room, turning the crystal chandeliers into prisms that danced across polished mahogany and crisp linen tablecloths. The air held the comforting smell of strong continental coffee steaming from silver pots, that blended with the faint sweetness of fresh hothouse roses and the lingering trace of last night's cigar smoke. Servants moved quietly, their footsteps soft on the parquet floor, while the distant sound of a piano being tuned drifted like an overture preparing for the next act. Hercule Poirot entered precisely at 9 o'clock, immaculate as ever, adjusting his magnificent moustache with 2 careful fingers. Bon matin, mes amis, he announced. The players returned to the stage. Now we begin the true scenes. Captain Hastings followed, cradling a hot coffee cup that warmed his palms against the slight morning chill still clinging to the marble terrace beyond the glass doors. Inspector Harlan, sleeves rolled up, nodded toward a small side room already arranged with chairs in a semicircle. Interviews. One at a time. Let's see who remembers their lines. First to enter was Elena Langford. She had exchanged last night's silk gown for a simple charcoal dress. Yet every movement carried the grace of someone who had spent years performing for cameras. She sat, crossed her ankles, and dabbed at perfectly dry eyes with a folded linen handkerchief. Victor had been troubled, she began, voice soft and measured. The studio losses, the pressure. He barely spoke to me these last weeks. Poirot leaned forward slightly, green eyes bright. Madame, your sorrow is most affecting. The tremble in the lip, the lowered gaze, beautifully done. But tell Poirot, at what exact time did you last see your husband yesterday evening? She hesitated the smallest fraction of a second. Did you catch it, mon ami? Then answered. Around 8, and he said he needed to work in the study. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. And you retired upstairs immediately after? Yes. Yet the butler saw a woman's shadow near the study door at 8:45. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the handkerchief. The mask held, but a tiny crack appeared. Next came Marcus Hale. The director strode in trailing the rich aroma of a fresh Cuban cigar he had clearly just extinguished. His rough tweed jacket caught in the velvet chair as he sat. We argued, sure, he admitted bluntly. Victor wanted to cut my name from the new picture. I told him exactly what I thought of that. But kill him? Ridiculous. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his hands. Monsieur, you play the gruff, honest man of cinema very well. The raised voice, the blunt words. It suits the part. But arguments that loud are rarely forgotten by those who overhear them. Vivian Drake was in the hall. None. Marcus shifted. Maybe. Doesn't mean anything. Perhaps, perhaps not. We shall see. Vivian Drake entered like a startled fawn, wide eyes and soft kid gloves clutched together. The faint sandalwood of her cologne floated forward with her. She accepted a glass of chilled champagne from the tray. Her hand shook just enough to make the bubbles dance. I was so fond of Mr. Langford, she whispered. He promised me the lead in his next film. I went to the garden to think. The lilies smelled so lovely at night. Poirot studied her. Mademoiselle, innocence becomes you. The trembling lip, the downcast eyes, perfect casting. Yet one small detail troubles Poirot. The garden paths were wet with dew last night. And your shoes show no dampness at all. Vivian blinked rapidly. I stayed on the stone patio. Ah, a change of story already. Interesting. James Croft, the butler, stood ramrod straight when his turn came. The faint smell of furniture wax still clung to his uniform. I served champagne to everyone from the same magnum, he said evenly. Mr. Langford took his glass himself. I saw nothing unusual. Poirot arranged 3 pencils on the table into perfect alignment. You perform duty with great precision, mon ami. No tremor, no hesitation. Admirable. But tell me, did you notice anyone enter or leave the study after 8:30? Croft's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. No, sir. Yet you yourself passed that door twice carrying trays. A curious blind spot. None. Last came Sylvia Thorne. She carried her coffee cup like a prop, in the hot liquid steaming as she sat. Victor owed my company a fortune, she said coolly. He poached my best director and my biggest star. Yes, I hated him. But poison? That's melodramatic even for Hollywood. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. Madame, your calm is impressive. Most people show some agitation after violent death. You show none. Why is that? I've seen worse on set. Perhaps. Or perhaps you have rehearsed the scene in your mind already. As the interviews ended, Poirot paced slowly before the tall windows where rain had begun to tap again. Hastings watched him. Contradictions everywhere, Hastings muttered. Eleanor's timeline doesn't match Croft's. Vivian's garden story changes. Marcus's anger was too fresh. Exactly, Poirot replied. Missed cues, hesitations, small slips in the script. He turned directly to you, the listener. Observe with Poirot, mon ami. The grieving widow avoids the study door. The loyal partner grips his chair too tightly. The innocent starlet changes her story. The perfect servant sees nothing. The calm rival drinks her coffee without a tremble. Ask yourself, who needs to play their role so carefully? The grandfather clock chimed 11. The fire crackled warmly against the cool draught from the terrace. Poirot inhaled the mingled scents of coffee, roses, and wood smoke, his little grey cells humming. Every actor has taken their mark, he said quietly. But truth does not need to rehearse. Lies flow smoothly until they do not. The players had entered. But who performed truth and who performed lies? In Chapter 3, the first act. By early afternoon, the Hollywood Hills estate had settled into an uneasy hush. Sunlight streamed through the tall geometric windows, throwing sharp Art Deco shadows across the parquet floor and the velvet curtains that framed the view of the gardens. The air inside carried comforting layers. The crackling warmth of the drawing room fire releasing faint wood smoke. The lingering sweetness of hothouse lilies arranged in crystal vases, and the rich, dark scent of strong continental coffee still steaming from silver pots on the sideboard. Outside, a light breeze stirred the roses, but inside, every footstep sounded too loud, every door closing too deliberate. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, watching the suspects move like actors waiting for their next cue. The first act begins in earnest, mon ami, he murmured to Hastings. Now we look deeper. Now the masks begin to show their cracks. Inspector Harlan returned from the study with a thin file. Cyanide. Confirmed. Fast, clean, tasteless in champagne. Bottle was opened for the party. Anyone could have slipped it in. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. Anyone we. But not everyone would choose so theatrical a method. Poison in champagne. It is dramatic, like the climax of a film. Someone wished the death to be noticed. They stepped onto the terrace first. The marble was cold underfoot, even in the sun. The chill night air of the previous evening still seemed to linger in the shadows. Poirot examined the garden path where Vivian Drake claimed to have walked. The lilies stood tall, petals soft and untouched. A dew had dried unevenly on the stone slabs. Mademoiselle Drake, Poirot called gently as Vivian appeared at the French doors, her silk scarf fluttering. You said you came here to smell the flowers. Yes. The scent calms me, Poirot pointed. Yet the dew remains perfect on the grass beside the path, Your delicate shoes would have left prints. There are none. Vivian's wide eyes flickered. I stayed on the stones. Earlier you said, in the garden. Now it is only the patio. A small change, but significant. She bit her lip. The mask slipped, just for a heartbeat. Did you catch it, mon ami? Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth. Back inside, Poirot summoned Marcus Hale to the library. The director sat heavily, a fresh cigar unlit between his fingers, and the smell of old leather bindings mixed with the faint trace of his earlier smoke. I was in here reading scripts after our argument, Marcus said. At what time? 8:30, until the scream. Poirot opened a small notebook. Yet James Croft saw you in the corridor near the study at 8:40, carrying nothing. Marcus's jaw tightened. Croft must be mistaken. Or perhaps you are the one mistaken in your timing? Poirot's green eyes gleamed. The performance of the busy director, admirable. But alibis should not require correction. Eleanor Langford was next. She entered trailing the expensive whisper of Worth perfume, sank into a velvet chair, and arranged her skirt with care. I loved Victor, she said, voice low, despite everything. Poirot studied her dry handkerchief. Madame, grief performs as relief sometimes. Do you weep most prettily, yet no tears fall, no mascara runs. The technique is perfect, too perfect. She looked away. I've cried so much already. There's nothing left. Perhaps. Or perhaps the grief began long before last night. The turning point came when Croft, under quiet pressure, produced a half-burnt letter retrieved from the study fireplace. The paper was singed but legible. Intimate words from Vivian to Victor, demanding promises he had apparently broken. Poirot held the fragment to the light. Ah, the ingenue's mask cracks at last. Obsession disguised as innocent admiration. Vivian, brought back in, went pale. It was only a note. A silly note. Poirot's voice remained gentle. A note that speaks of threats, mademoiselle. You promised me the lead, or I would make sure everyone knew. Not the language of love. She collapsed into tears. Real ones this time, shoulders shaking. Poirot observed carefully. The performance. She weeps. The voice cracks beautifully. The tell. The letter was burned after the body was found. Yet only someone who knew its contents would bother. The psychology. I am reminded of the case at Styles, where a young woman performed devotion so convincingly that even Poirot was briefly deceived. She rehearsed her soft glances, her trembling hands, her timely tears in front of mirrors. But she made one fatal error. She knew the timing of the poison too precisely, mentioning symptoms before the doctor. The body betrays when the mind over-rehearses. Obsession, mes amis, it drives one to extremes, and the mask cannot hold forever under steady light. The truth, Vivian had known of Victor's rejection days earlier. Her innocence was carefully constructed theater. The room fell silent, except for the soft crackle of the fire and the distant patter of rain returning to the windows. Poirot arranged the burnt letter fragment neatly on the table beside his coffee cup. Observe with Poirot, he said, turning to you directly. The starlet who changes her story, the partner whose alibi shifts, the widow whose eyes stay dry. Ask yourself, why does obsession need to burn evidence? Why does grief refuse to weep? The tension coiled tighter. Someone would break character soon. The first act concluded. Some masks had cracked. No, chapter 4. Rehearsed lines. Late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of the drawing room. turning the crystal chandeliers into slow-moving prisms that flickered across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The air had thickened with the day's tension. Wood smoke drifted from the low fire, mingling with the rich scent of Cuban cigars Marcus Hale had smoked earlier. The faint trace of Eleanor's Worth perfume and the sharp, comforting bite of fresh continental coffee still warm in silver pots. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the glass, a soft percussion that underscored every word spoken inside. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, like a director calling the cast to attention. He had arranged 5 chairs in a precise semicircle, each suspect's place marked. "Now we come to the testing of scripts," he announced quietly. "Rehearsed lines are beautiful until pressure is applied. Then they falter. Let us see whose performance holds." Eleanor Langford was summoned first. She entered with measured grace, silk scarf trailing, and sat with hands folded in her lap. A crisp linen handkerchief rested untouched beside her. "I have told you everything," she began. "I went upstairs at 8:15. I never left my room until the scream." Poirot produced a single kid glove, cream-colored, delicate, found wedged behind a potted palm near the study door. "Madame, this glove is yours. The monogram inside confirms it. How does it come to be there if you never approached the study?" Eleanor's composure cracked for the first time. Her fingers twitched toward the handkerchief, but did not lift it. I must have dropped it earlier in the day." Earlier in the day, the glove was not there. Croft polished that very palm at 7:30. Poirot tilted his head. "Your role as the grieving widow requires you to stay far from the scene. Yet here is evidence you came close. A small slip, but telling." Marcus Hale followed, cigar already between his fingers, though unlit. The rough tweed of his jacket rasped against the velvet chair as he sat. "I told you. I argued with Victor, yes, loudly. But I went straight to the library afterward. I was there when the scream came." Poirot opened a small notebook. "Yet Vivian Drake, passing the corridor at 8:40, saw you near the study door, not in the library. You were holding something small, perhaps a vial." Marcus's face darkened. "She's lying, or mistaken. 2 witnesses now place you outside your script. The angry partner who shouts, then vanishes from sight. Your lines are beginning to tangle, monsieur." Vivian Drake entered next, pale and trembling, soft kid gloves clutched together like a shield. She accepted a glass of chilled champagne, but did not drink. The bubbles rose untouched. "The letter was nothing," she insisted. "A foolish note written in anger. I burned it, because I was ashamed." Poirot regarded her gently. "Mademoiselle, innocent notes do not need burning, and innocent starlets do not change the details of their evening walk 3 times. First the garden, then only the patio. Now you admit you stepped off the stones after all, to pick a lily for your hair." Vivian's eyes filled with real tears. "He promised me everything," then laughed. "I hated him for a moment, but I didn't poison him." "The performance shifts," Poirot observed, "from perfect innocence to wounded heartbreak. Yet the vial of cyanide was found in the garden shed, near the very spot you now confess to visiting." She gasped. "That isn't mine." James Croft stood ramrod straight when called. The faint smell of furniture wax still clung to his uniform sleeves. "I served the champagne equally to all," he repeated. "Mr. Langford took his own glass. I saw no one tamper with it." Poirot made a small expressive gesture. "You perform duty with admirable precision. No tremor, no hesitation. But precision can be rehearsed, and servants who see everything usually see too much. He placed a small brown bottle on the table. This was discovered behind the pantry shelves. Cyanide crystals. The label is missing, but the bottle matches those used in the estate's darkroom. You developed Mr. Langford's private photographs. None. Croft's jaw locked. Anyone could have placed it there. Yet only you have keys to the pantry. A perfect servant leaves no fingerprints, except when he forgets to wipe one surface. Sylvia Thorne was last. She carried her coffee cup like armor, the hot liquid steaming as she sat. I hated Victor, she said flatly. He ruined my last production. But I did not kill him. I was in the conservatory the whole time. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. Madame, your calm is a masterpiece. Most would show some fear by now. Yet you sip coffee as though at a matinee. Why? I've faced worse critics? Perhaps. Or perhaps you have rehearsed this scene already. He produced a folded paper. A promissory note. Victor forgave your studio's debt on condition you withdrew a lawsuit. The signature is his. The ink is fresh. You visited him privately last week. Not to talk business, but to beg. Sylvia's cup rattled against the saucer. He threatened to ruin me completely. And so the calm rival becomes the desperate woman. Another mask begins to slip. Poirot paced slowly before the semicircle. The rain drummed harder now, a steady rhythm against the windows. The fire crackled, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny applause. Observe with me, mon ami, he said, turning directly to you. The widow's glove near the scene. The partner scene where he should not be. The starlet's changing story. The servant's hidden bottle. The rival's fresh signature. Each performance strains under the lightest pressure. Ask yourself, who rehearses hardest? The one with most to hide. He arranged the collected items, glove, burnt letter fragment, bottle, promissory note, into perfect symmetry on the low table. Rehearsed lines are elegant, he murmured, but truth needs no rehearsal. It simply is. The drawing room fell quiet, except for the rain and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock. Every suspect sat frozen, masks taut, waiting for the next cue. Rehearsed lines began to falter. Truth needed no rehearsal. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. Evening had fallen over the Hollywood Hills estate. The drawing room glowed with the soft amber light of table lamps and the steady crackle of the fire, sending curls of wood smoke into the air to mingle with the fading sweetness of hothouse lilies and the sharp trace of Cuban cigar smoke that still clung to the velvet curtains. Rain drummed steadily against the tall windows, a rhythmic backdrop that made every voice inside sound louder, more exposed. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked with deliberate slowness, as though counting down to the moment the performance would shatter. Hercule Poirot had chosen the private study for this confrontation, the very room where Victor Langford had died. The scent of bitter almonds lingered faintly beneath the smell of polished mahogany and spilled champagne. He stood near the desk, small hands clasped behind his back, egg-shaped head tilted as Vivian Drake was brought in first. Mademoiselle Drake, Poirot began quietly. Oh, your role as the innocent starlet has been most charming. The wide eyes, the trembling lip, the soft kid gloves clutched in distress. Perfect casting. But the curtain must rise on the truth now. Vivian stood rigid, silk scarf twisted between her fingers. I didn't kill him, she whispered. I swear it. Poirot gestured to the low table, where the half-burned letter, the cyanide bottle from the garden shed, and her own changed statements lay arranged in perfect symmetry. The performance? You weep prettily when cornered. The tell? You knew the champagne had a strange aftertaste before anyone mentioned poison. Only the one who placed the cyanide would notice such a detail so soon. Her face crumpled. Real tears came this time, streaking mascara in dark lines. He promised me the lead, the stardom I deserved. Then he laughed, said I was replaceable. I wanted to scare him, just scare him. The cyanide was only supposed to make him sick, make him see how much he needed me. She sank onto the velvet chaise, shoulders shaking. Poirot observed her with clinical gentleness. The mask has fallen, mademoiselle. Beneath it, the true face of obsession turned to desperation. The psychology is clear. I am reminded of the case on the Nile, where a woman performed love so convincingly that her jealousy was mistaken for devotion. She rehearsed every smile, every tender glance, every tear in private. But she slipped when she described the poison's effects before the symptoms appeared. Only the killer could know. Love, when twisted, performs as passion until the heart betrays it. Obsession does not forgive rejection. It avenges. Vivian sobbed openly now. I didn't mean for him to die. Poirot turned to the doorway where the others had gathered, summoned silently by Hastings. Eleanor Langford stood frozen, Worth perfume sharp in the tense air. Marcus Hale gripped an unlit cigar so tightly the wrapper tore. Sylvia Thorne's coffee cup trembled in her hand. James Croft remained at the back, face expressionless. Poirot raised one small hand. But wait, Mademoiselle Vivian's breakdown reveals more than her own guilt. She did not act entirely alone. Vivian looked up, startled. What? You placed the poison in the champagne bottle earlier in the evening, while the party was still lively. But someone helped ensure Victor took that particular glass. Someone who knew his habits. Someone who refilled his flute when no one watched. Eleanor stepped forward, silk rustling. That's absurd. Vivian couldn't have... Poirot cut her off gently. Madame, your loyalty to the young starlet is touching, yet it performs too strongly. Why defend her so fiercely? Because you knew of her plan, or because you needed her to be the visible hand while yours remained hidden? Eleanor's dry handkerchief dropped to the floor. I only wanted him to suffer. The affairs, the lies, the way he humiliated me in front of everyone. Marcus growled low. You're twisting everything, Poirot. Am I? Observe the partner, mon ami, Poirot said, addressing you directly. Monsieur Hale's anger was real. Real enough to supply Vivian with the cyanide from the darkroom supplies he controlled. A quiet favor for a desperate ingenue. A way to remove Victor without dirtying his own hands completely. Sylvia set her cup down with a clink. This is madness. Madame Thorne, your calm has served you well. But the promissory note Victor forced you to sign, it was blackmail. You visited him that afternoon. You saw Vivian in tears. You suggested the joke that became murder. James Croft finally spoke, voice flat. Enough speculation. Poirot turned to him last. And the perfect servant. Always present, always unseen. You refilled the glasses. You knew which flute was Victor's. Your performance of duty was flawless, too flawless. A brother disinherited, watching his sibling live in luxury. Resentment performs as loyalty until the mask can bear no more. The room fell deathly quiet, except for the rain and the fire's soft crackle. Vivian's sobs had quieted to shuddering breaths. Eleanor stared at the carpet. Marcus crushed the cigar in his fist. Sylvia's hand shook. Croft's face remained stone, but his knuckles were white. Poirot drew himself up to his full, still modest, height. The mask had fallen for one. Now it slips for all. Beneath the performances, obsession, betrayal, greed, revenge, the true faces emerge at last. He looks straight at you, the listener. Watch carefully, mon ami. When pressure is applied, even the best actor forgets their lines. Ask yourself, who breaks next? The study seems smaller now, the air heavier with revealed truths. The spotlight of Poirot's method had burned away the glamour, leaving only raw human nature. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain night had fully claimed the Hollywood Hills estate. The drawing room lamps burned low, casting long Art Deco shadows across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The fire had settled to glowing embers, releasing thin threads of wood smoke that blended with the lingering sweetness of dying hothouse roses and the faint, expensive trace of Worth perfume Eleanor still wore. Rain had eased to a soft drizzle, tapping irregularly against the tall windows like hesitant applause after a difficult scene. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, slow and deliberate, reminding everyone that the performance was far from over. Hercule Poirot moved to the center of the room, small hands gesturing expressively as he addressed the assembled cast. Mes amis, we have seen the masks slip. Now we pull back the curtain entirely. Behind every elegant role lies the backstage truth, the motives, the connections, the secrets no one wished to share. He began with Elena Langford. She sat on the velvet chaise, the silk scarf twisted in her lap, eyes fixed on the carpet. Madame, your performance as the devoted yet suffering wife was most convincing, yet letters hidden in the safe tell another story. Poirot produced a small bundle of envelopes tied with ribbon. These are from you to Marcus Hale, dated over 3 years. Passionate, secret meetings arranged while Victor was away on location. You never ended the affair. You simply learned to perform indifference. Eleanor's breath caught. It was over long ago. Yet the letters continued until 6 months before his death. Resentment does not vanish, madame. It waits behind the curtain. Marcus Hale stood abruptly, rough tweed jacket creased from hours of tension. The unlit cigar between his fingers trembled slightly. That's private, he growled. Private no longer, Poirot replied. Monsieur, you supplied Vivian with the cyanide crystals from your darkroom supplies. A favor to a desperate young woman you pitied. Or perhaps used. You knew Victor planned to cut you from the partnership entirely. Exposure of your affair with Elena would ruin you both financially and socially. Motive performed as loyalty until it could no longer. Vivian Drake huddled in a corner chair, soft kid gloves abandoned on the floor beside her. Mascara tracks still marked her cheeks from the earlier tears. Poirot turned to her gently. Mademoiselle, your obsession was not born in a single night. Victor exploited it. He kept photographs, intimate, compromising. They were found locked in his desk drawer, blackmailed to ensure your silence about his other indiscretions. You performed adoration publicly, while terror grew backstage. Vivian whispered, He said he'd destroy my career. I just wanted the pictures gone. James Croft remained near the doorway, posture rigid as ever. The faint smell of furniture wax still clung to him like a signature. And you, mon ami, Poirot said, the perfect servant, always present, always invisible. Yet Victor Langford had a secret even his wife did not fully know. You were his half-brother, illegitimate, never acknowledged. Your mother worked in this very house decades ago. Victor inherited everything. You inherited nothing but the keys to the pantry and the keys to revenge. Croft's jaw tightened. He treated me like dirt. I watched him waste fortunes while I polished his silver. Resentment performs as duty, Poirot observed, until the moment arrives to rewrite the ending. Sylvia Thorne sat apart, coffee cup cold in her hands. Madame, in your calm rival act concealed desperation. Victor held promissory notes, your entire studio mortgaged to him after he sabotaged your last production. He threatened foreclosure unless you dropped every claim against him. You visited him that final afternoon, not to negotiate, but to plead. When he refused, you saw Vivian crying in the garden. You suggested she teach him a lesson. A careless word that became murder. Sylvia's voice was barely audible. I never thought she would actually do it. Poirot paced slowly before them all, arranging the revealed items on the low table into perfect order. Love letters, blackmail photographs, promissory notes, the cyanide bottle label fragment. Behind the curtain, we find the real script. Elna and Marcus, longtime lovers plotting to free themselves from Victor's control. Vivian, blackmailed and broken, a push toward poison. Croft, silent brother, nursing decades of injustice. Sylvia, cornered financially, whispering the fatal idea. Each believed their role protected them. Each forgot that secrets connect like threads in a tapestry. Pull one, and the whole design unravels. He turned directly to you, the listener. Observe with Poirot, mon ami, the grieving widow who never wept, the loyal partner who supplied poison, the innocent starlet who burned evidence, the dutiful servant who knew too much, the calm rival who suggested the joke. Ask yourself, when so many masks hide the same stage, who truly directed the tragedy? The fire gave a final soft crackle. Rain whispered against the glass. The room felt smaller, stripped of glamour, revealing only raw human motives beneath the Art Deco elegance. The Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, green eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The drawing room of the Hollywood Hills estate had become a true theater that night. Every lamp was lit, turning the crystal chandeliers into blazing constellations that reflected across polished mahogany and velvet curtains. The fire roared steadily, sending warm gusts of wood smoke, scented with faint traces of Cuban cigar and dying hothouse roses. Rain had stopped. Only the soft drip from the eaves remained, like the last hesitant claps after a shocking climax. The grandfather clock struck 10. All the players were assembled. Elena Langford on the chaise, Marcus Hale standing rigid, Vivian Drake huddled in shadow, James Croft near the doorway, Sylvia Thorne seated with cold coffee untouched. Captain Hastings stood by the tall windows. Hercule Poirot took center stage, small but commanding, his green eyes gleaming under the light. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm, yet carrying to every corner. You have each performed for Poirot, some with truth, most with lies. The time has come to review the performances. Let us lower the curtain on illusion. He turned first to Eleanor Langford. Madame, you played the grieving widow with exquisite technique, the delicate dab of the dry handkerchief, the perfectly timed tremble in the voice, the averted eyes. Magnifique. But grief does not rehearse. Your glove near the study door, your continued letters to Monsieur Hale, your dry eyes when true sorrow would weep, The performance was costume, not feeling. You knew of the poison, and you purchased cyanide months ago for garden pests. Relief performed as sorrow, because freedom was finally near. Eleanor's silk scarf slipped from her fingers. She did not pick it up. Poirot moved to Marcus Hale. Monsieur, you performed the loyal partner and gruff director so convincingly. The blunt words, the steady cigar, the righteous anger. Yet loyalty does not supply cyanide to a desperate young woman. Loyalty does not lie about being in the library when witnesses saw you near the study. Your fingerprints were found on the vial. You helped Vivian because Victor planned to expose your long affair with his wife and cut you from every future profit. Resentment performed as friendship until the mask could hold no longer. Marcus crushed the unlit cigar in his fist. Tobacco scattered like fallen props. Next, Vivian Drake. Mademoiselle, your role was the innocent starlet, wide eyes, trembling gloves, soft whispers of admiration. Yet innocent starlets do not burn threatening letters in the study fireplace after the body is discovered. They do not know the bitter almond smell before it is named. Obsession performed as love, until rejection turned it to poison. You placed the cyanide in the champagne bottle. Your performance cracked when you changed your garden story 3 times. The ingenue became the avenger. Vivian buried her face in her hands. Real sobs shook her shoulders. No rehearsal needed now. Poirot's gaze settled on Sylvia Thorne. Madame, you played the cool, unflappable rival, sipping coffee while others trembled, calm words while chaos swirled. But calm masks terror. Victor held your studio in debt. He blackmailed you with promissory notes. You signed under duress. You visited him that afternoon to beg. When he refused, you saw Vivian weeping in the garden and whispered the fatal suggestion. Teach him a lesson. Your careless word lit the fuse. Helpfulness performed as indifference, until the spotlight found you. Sylvia's cup clattered to the saucer. She did not speak. Finally, Poirot faced James Croft. And you, mon ami, the most convincing performance of all. The perfect servant, silent, efficient, invisible. Shock registered appropriately. Helpfulness offered at every turn. No tremor in the hand that poured champagne. Bravo. Yet you made one fatal error. One small moment when the mask slipped completely. He stepped closer. You mentioned the bitter almond smell in the study before the autopsy report ever confirmed cyanide. Only the person who placed the poison would recognize that precise odor so quickly. You, Victor's illegitimate half-brother, disinherited and forced to serve the man who stole your birthright, refilled his glass that night. Resentment performed as duty for decades. The psychology is clear. I recall the Ackroyd case, where a trusted relative performed calm detachment to hide murderous greed for inheritance. He rehearsed every gesture, every measured word, yet he described details of the crime scene only the killer could know. Familial betrayal cuts deepest. It overcompensates with perfect service, until one tiny slip betrays everything. You poisoned the champagne, Croft. The servant directed the tragedy. Croft's shoulders sagged. For the first time, his rigid posture broke. He took everything, left me nothing but keys and polish. Poirot drew himself up, still small, yet filling the room. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth takes her final bow. He looked at each in turn, then directly at you, the listener. Observe, mon ami. Every actor forgets their lines eventually. The widow who never wept, the partner who supplied poison, the starlet who burned evidence, the rival who whispered murder, the servant who knew the smell of death before anyone named it. Ask yourself, when so many masks hide one stage, who truly held the poison? Silence fell, broken only by the fire's soft crackle and the distant drip of rain. Poirot arranged 5 small objects on the table: glove, vial fragment, burned letter, promissory note, a single champagne flute shard, into perfect symmetry. All the final act has concluded. Only truth survives the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The drawing room lamps had been dimmed to a soft glow, leaving the fire as the principal light. Embers pulsed like dying footlights, casting flickering warmth across velvet curtains and the polished mahogany that had witnessed every performance. The air felt lighter now, stripped of cigar smoke and heavy perfume. Only the clean scent of rain-soaked roses drifted in from the open terrace doors, mingling with the faint wood smoke that still clung to the hearth. The grandfather clock chimed 11 times, slow final notes that marked the end of the long evening's drama. Inspector Harlan stepped forward first, handcuffs glinting in the low light. James Croft stood motionless as the steel clicked around his wrists. His rough tweed uniform, once a perfect costume of service, now looked rumpled and ordinary. "You have the right to remain silent," Harlan began in his flat American drawl. Croft made no protest. He simply looked once at Poirot, eyes empty of the rehearsed deference that had served him for decades, then allowed himself to be led towards the marble hallway. Footsteps echoed on the parquet, each one softer than the last, until the front door closed with a quiet, definitive thud. Eleanor Langford remained seated on the chaise longue, silk scarf forgotten in her lap. For the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed. The rigid posture of the grieving widow dissolved. She exhaled slowly, as though breathing freely after years in a too tight corset. "It's over," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. Truly over." She looked toward the study door, no longer avoiding it, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips. Not joy, but relief. The mask of sorrow had been heavy. Now she could set it aside. Vivian Drake sat curled in an armchair, knees drawn up, mascara tracks long dried on her cheeks. Hastings offered her a glass of chilled water. She accepted it with shaking hands, the crystal cool against her palm. "I never wanted anyone to die," she said quietly. "I just wanted to matter." Poirot approached, voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, the theater of ambition is cruel. You performed obsession because you believed it was the only role available. Now the curtain has fallen. A new part awaits, one you write yourself." She nodded, small and uncertain. But the wide-eyed innocence was gone, replaced by something raw, more honest. Marcus Hale stood near the fireplace, staring into the embers. He had not lit another cigar. His fingers flexed restlessly, without their usual prop. "I supplied the poison," he admitted hoarsely. "Thought it would only make him sick, force him to reconsider the partnership. I never imagined." He trailed off. Poirot regarded him without judgment. "Monsieur, resentment performs as pragmatism until it becomes complicity. You will answer for your part, but truth has its own justice. Perhaps, in time, you rebuild, not on stolen credit, but on honest work." Marcus gave a single bitter nod. The gruff director's mask had cracked wide open. What remained was a tired, flawed man. Sylvia Thorne rose slowly, setting her cold coffee cup on the side table with deliberate care. The calm rival had vanished, but her face showed exhaustion, and something close to gratitude. I whispered the idea to Vivian, she said. A careless, angry suggestion. I thought it would humiliate him, nothing more. She met Poirot's eyes. Thank you for seeing the whole stage, not just the spotlight on one player. Poirot inclined his head. Madame, justice does not applaud. It simply arrives. The police moved quietly through the house, gathering final statements and sealing the study. Hastings stood beside Poirot at the terrace doors, feeling the cool night air brush his face after hours of fire-warmed tension. They're all changed, he murmured, even the innocent ones. May we? Poirot replied softly. When masks fall, people are revealed. Some break, some rebuild. The theater empties, but the actors carry the lesson. Helena stood at last, smoothing her dress with hands that no longer trembled. I'm selling the house, she announced to no one in particular. Too many memories performed here. I'll find a smaller place, somewhere quiet. Perhaps I'll act again, for myself this time. Vivian looked up. I want real roles, not ones that depend on promises. Marcus grunted. I'll fight the charges. If I lose, I'll direct community theater when I get out. Better than polishing someone else's name. Sylvia gave a faint smile. My studio still stands. I'll rebuild it, without debt, without blackmail. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, watching them. The Art Deco elegance of the room felt different now. Less a stage set, more a space that had witnessed truth. Observe, mon ami, he said to Hastings, and to you, how the performance ends. No curtain calls with applause, no bouquets, only justice, quiet and certain. One by one, the suspects were escorted out or allowed to retire to their rooms under guard. The house grew still. The fire burned low. Rain began again, gentle now, washing the terrace clean. No applause for this performance, only justice. Chapter 9. After the show, morning sunlight flooded the Hollywood Hills estate, for the first time since the tragedy. The tall Art Deco windows stood open to a fresh breeze that carried the clean scent of wet roses from the garden and the faint, comforting aroma of strong continental coffee brewing in the kitchen. The velvet curtains had been drawn back fully. The polished mahogany tables gleamed without the weight of cigar smoke or heavy perfume. The fire had been allowed to die to ashes overnight, thus leaving only a trace of wood smoke that mingled with the crisp morning air drifting in from the terrace. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, bright, unhurried notes that seemed to declare the house could breathe again. Hercule Poirot stood on the terrace, small hands clasped behind his back, watching the transformation unfold. Captain Hastings joined him, a hot cup of coffee warming his palms against the lingering chill. They're all different now, Hastings said quietly. Even the house feels changed. Inside, Helena Langford moved through the drawing room with purposeful steps. She wore a simple linen dress, no longer the black silk of mourning. Servants packed boxes around her, crystal vases, leather-bound books, framed photographs of Victor in his producer days. I've accepted an offer on the estate, she told Poirot when he entered. A museum buyer. They want to preserve the Art Deco style, turn it into a public exhibit of old Hollywood glamour. She gave a small, genuine smile. No more private stages. No more performances for one man's ego. I'll take a modest apartment downtown. Perhaps I'll return to the screen, not as the tragic wife, but as myself. Poirot inclined his head. Madame, the mask of the grieving widow was heavy. Now you walk lighter. The theater has released you. Vivian Drake appeared next, carrying a single small suitcase. Her wide eyes had lost their rehearsed innocence. In their place was quiet determination. She had washed away the last traces of mascara and wore a plain coat over a simple dress. "I'm going back to the studio lot today," she said. "Not for promises, but for auditions. Real ones. No more depending on anyone's word." She paused, looking at Poirot. "Thank you for seeing past the role I was playing." "Mademoiselle," Poirot replied gently, "obsession performed as love, until it broke you. Now you choose a new script, one written by your own hand. The spotlight will find you again, but this time you stand in it honestly." Marcus Hale sat at the long dining table, a notepad open before him. No cigar in sight. His rough tweed jacket hung loosely on the chair back. He had already spoken to his lawyer that morning. "I'll plead to accessory," he told Poirot without looking up. "I supplied the poison. I'll serve whatever time they give. After that, I'm thinking of teaching, directing workshops for young filmmakers who don't have studio connections. No more cutting names from credits. To no more stolen glory." Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Monsieur, resentment performed as pragmatism for too long. Now you rewrite the ending. The stage is large enough for honest work." Sylvia Thorne stood near the open terrace doors, letting the breeze cool her face. Her coffee cup was full again, hot, steaming, no tremor in her grip. "The bank released the lien on my studio yesterday," she said. "Victor's death voided the promissory notes he held. I'm free." She turned to Poirot. "I whispered the worst idea of my life to Vivian. I'll carry that. But I'm going to make films again. Good ones. Stories that don't depend on blackmail or broken promises." "Madame," Poirot said, "calm masked terror until the curtain fell. Now terror is gone. You direct your own company with clear eyes." James Croft was gone, taken away the night before. His room stood empty, the faint smell of furniture wax already fading. A small note had been left on his dresser, a simple apology to the staff he had worked beside for years. No grand confession, only quiet regret from a man who had performed duty too long and too perfectly. Poirot walked slowly through the house one last time. The study door stood open now. No cordon, no bitter almond scent. Sunlight fell across the desk where Victor had died, turning scattered papers golden. Hastings followed, feeling the shift in the air. "The theater is emptying," Poirot murmured. "The actors depart, carrying their lessons. Some will stumble, some will rise, but all have seen behind their own masks." Elna paused at the front door, turning back. "Mr. Poirot, will you stay for coffee before you leave?" He smiled faintly. "A tisane, perhaps. But first, Hastings and I must catch our train. There are always new stages, mon ami." The group gathered briefly on the terrace. No handshakes, no forced smiles, only quiet nods of farewell. Vivian left first, suitcase in hand, stepping into a waiting car without looking back. Marcus followed, notepad tucked under his arm. Sylvia lingered longest, breathing the rose-scented air, as though memorizing it. Poirot watched them go, then turned to you directly. "Observe, mon ami. When the curtain falls, the masks do not simply vanish. They are set aside. Some actors mourn what they performed. Some rejoice at what they can now become. The theater empties, but the lessons remain. Truth frees where deception imprisons. And remember this when you watch your own life's small dramas." The estate grew quiet. Birds sang in the garden. Sunlight warmed the marble terrace. The Hollywood Hills stood peaceful once more. The theater emptied, but the lessons lingered. Chapter 10. Poirot Reviews. The Performance. Hercule Poirot sat comfortably in the first-class compartment of the Sunset Limited as it glided eastward through the American desert. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, warming the polished wood paneling and turning his tisane cup into a small golden vessel. The tea, herbal, light, perfectly steeped, released a gentle fragrance of chamomile and mint that cut cleanly through the faint, lingering scent of drain varnish and distant cigar smoke from the lounge car. Outside, the landscape rolled past in wide, empty strokes. Red rock, sagebrush, an endless sky. Inside, order reigned. His small traveling case rested on the opposite seat, contents arranged symmetrically. A fresh linen napkin lay folded beside his saucer. Everything was as it should be. A small stack of newspapers and telegrams had arrived at the last station. Poirot unfolded them one by one with precise movements, touching his magnificent moustache thoughtfully as he read. James Croft had been convicted. Manslaughter rather than murder. The jury deciding his decades of silent resentment did not quite reach premeditated intent. He would serve 15 years. Eleanor Langford had indeed sold the estate. It was already being converted into the Langford Hollywood Heritage Museum, its Art Deco rooms preserved as a monument to an era of glamour and hidden tragedy. Vivian Drake had landed her first honest lead role, a small but speaking part in an independent picture, and the reviews spoke of raw authenticity. Marcus Hale had pleaded to accessory and received probation. He now taught directing at a community college, no longer chasing studio credit. Sylvia Thorne's studio had released its first post-scandal film, a quiet drama about betrayal and redemption, and early notices called it surprisingly honest. Poirot set the papers aside and sipped his tisane, letting the warmth spread through him. He addressed the empty compartment, and you, the listener, softly. Mes amis, this Hollywood theater has closed its doors, yet the performance lingers in the mind. Why do people choose to act rather than reveal the truth? The psychology is simple, yet profound. Our society hands us scripts from birth. The devoted wife, the loyal partner, the innocent ingenue, the dutiful servant, the unflappable rival. We rehearse them because raw honesty is dangerous. It exposes greed, fear, wounded pride, the small cruelties we hide even from ourselves. Masks protect. Masks allow us to survive the spotlight of judgment. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, green eyes thoughtful. In this case, each actor wore their mask until it became suffocating. Eleanor performed grief to conceal relief at freedom from a cruel husband. Marcus performed loyalty to mask long-simmering resentment over stolen credit and a shared lover. Vivian performed adoration to hide the terror of blackmail and rejection. Croft performed perfect service to veil decades of disinheritance and quiet rage. And Sylvia performed calm to bury financial desperation and one careless, fatal suggestion. Every mask was society's gift, and every mask betrayed its wearer. Guilt always betrays the actor. A dry handkerchief when tears should fall, a steady hand when shock should tremble. A premature mention of bitter almonds, only the poisoner could know. The body remembers what the mind rehearses to forget. He paused, gazing at the passing desert. I am reminded of the chocolate box affair in Belgium many years ago. A woman of high society masked devotion as cold indifference to protect her family's honor after her husband's scandal. She rehearsed every aloof glance, every measured word, every polite refusal of sympathy. She fooled the police, the press, even her closest friends. But she made one error. When I questioned her about a small chocolate box containing poison, her hand reached instinctively to adjust her necklace, a gesture she had never made before. The body, mes amis, knows the truth even when the face lies. In that case, love performed as hate to shield innocence. Here, hate performed as duty to claim what was denied. Both crumbled under the same pressure. Steady observation, order and method, the refusal to accept the rehearsed line as final. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, a faint smile touching his lips. Why does truth ultimately triumph over performance? Because lies require effort. Every word must be weighed, every gesture timed, every emotion simulated. Truth flows naturally. It needs no rehearsal. The little gray cells understand this. And when pressure is applied, when the spotlight burns too brightly, the performance exhausts itself. One small slip, a dry eye, a changed story, a scent recognized too soon. The mask cracks, then shatters, and once shattered, it cannot be repaired. The actor stands revealed, flawed, human, accountable. He set the empty tisane cup down with care, arranging it perfectly in its saucer. In Hollywood, where every face is a commodity and every role a transaction, the masks are thicker, the performances more dazzling. Yet human nature remains unchanged. Greed will always reach for more. Fear will always hide. Love twisted into obsession will always seek revenge. Pride will always pretend. But the theater of crime has one eternal rule. Every actor eventually forgets their lines. And when they do, a truth steps forward to take her bow. Poirot leaned back against the plush seat, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Until the next theater of crime opens its curtain, mes amis, Poirot will be watching. Always. The train whistle sounded once, long and clear, carrying the words into the vast American evening.